All right, so let's move on to our next movie that is fine, otherwise known as the Cloverfield Paradox from 2018, which is, I guess, actually now 3 years ago. I was going to say two. That's not right.
Yeah.
Spoilers for this and none of the other, well, you might spoil the Cloverfield movies. I haven't seen them, but any other
You
movie
haven't
we
seen
talk about,
either of them?
I haven't seen either of them.
Okay.
I've heard the first one is good and the second one is all right or good depending on who I've heard talk about it. But so, anyways, spoilers for this and any movie we talk about, the Cloverfield Paradox. I watched a bunch of reviews around when this came out, and I got differing opinions of whether it was bad, good, or just bad, or what. And you get to do the synopsis for it. So go ahead.
The Earth is in great peril, and we know this because a couple talks about it in a car while they drive somewhere. And there's a real hard question. Is she going to save the planet, or isn't she? Because if she doesn't do it, no one else might. So she makes the truly difficult character decision to go up to save the planet by harnessing the power of the galaxy or something like that in this crazy what is it, a space station. Unfortunately, as a crazy religious doomsayer foretells on the news so that we know exactly what's going on, dimensions smash into each other, weird crap happens, and they lose the Earth and the Earth loses them, and they've got to fix their space station and get back to their dimension. And oh no, there's a Cloverfield monster. So that is this movie.
You have sold it just slightly short. You're not really wrong, but that conversation that you're talking about, they're actually in line to get gas, and like they've been in line for like an hour or two or something. So there's slightly more than them talking about it. They are essentially saying what we get to see on screen, which is stupid. And yeah, her choice isn't really that interesting.
Cloverfield Parent. So in the previous discussion of Alien versus Predator, I mentioned that I think the sweet spot for me is a creative movie, and that can be Robot Monster, where it's creative at the expense of any kind of internal logic or or plot, really, and I'll enjoy it. Or it can be creative and it can be a Buñuel film, and I'll enjoy it while it's making commentary about the unfairness of life. This movie had a few creative bits in it, but it also had a lot of the paint by number stuff that we saw in Alien versus Predator. Particularly, you won't believe this, but her kids are dead, and this is motivating her.
This has about the same amount of character as Alien versus Predator. Actually, it probably has slightly more, but it somehow feels more rote and tread upon in a way where it like bothers me. Like it looks better to me. I thought it was shot a little better, but in a weird way, that and the music and the way they were acting, like I'm kind of just probably going to blame the director for this, but whatever went into it, it just is even more rote and tread upon than the Alien versus Predator like story. Not the ideas, but like the story and the characters and the paths they follow.
You know, it's interesting because I'm going to say I like this more than Alien versus Predator. It is a fine line. Kirby dislikes it intensely, and I think part of it is that he feels like the whole Cloverfield thing was a marketing scheme, which it was. I mean,
yes.
I reread the Wikipedia that talks about it, and like as they were shooting it, like the people shooting it didn't know it was a Cloverfield film.
Yeah.
And the Cloverfield connection in 10 Cloverfield Lane is pretty tenuous. You haven't seen it, so I won't talk about it. I'm not a huge fan of the Cloverfield films. They're fine. They're maybe not for me. I've seen them both. I saw them in the theater. He also thought that the space station was profoundly stupid looking, and it doesn't make sense that it's not alien technology. It like doesn't like, so here we have an Earth that is just barely hanging on, and somehow they make that thing.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that kind of stuff as much, and I also like it when weird crap happens, like someone screaming because they're inside a bulkhead. I mean, it made
that was great.
Made me flash on the Star Trek episode that's has a woman like fall through the floor and die, and everybody's like, well, that sucks, and then they move on with the plot, which is kind of funny. It is one of the more existentially terrifying moments in Star Trek that like no one talks about in the episode. I can't remember what episode it is. I think it's a later season, but it's hard for me to imagine that if Roy from the IT crowd, whose real name is Chris O'Dowd, I lost it for a moment, if he wasn't in it, I may like Alien versus Predator more if Chris O'Dowd weren't in it, because he seems to know what movie he's in and isn't taking it too seriously. And at one point he loses his hand or his arm, and his arm writes them a message, and then it dies, I guess, because none of this makes any, I mean, this is almost robot monster logic. Like, why his hand is able to write a message and then why it then dies, I don't know. And the explanation is because dimensions smashed into each other, but how that possibly connects makes absolutely no sense to me. But then he kind of just keeps making jokes about how he doesn't have an arm for a while until he dies, because it's one of those movies. So
ultimately, I think I like Cloverfield Paradox more than Alien versus Predator 2. Again, they're both, as you say, it's a fine line. But they're like, so he loses his arm and there's no payoff for that at the end, which is really annoying. And I mean, like, it's a cool thing when it happens and it's weird looking, and then I forget what it writes, but it's like, hey, it's neat. And then like later he gets murdered by some magnetic stuff, because why not? Like they just seem to be being murdered because of plot and story. Like there's no reason for it. And so like it's kind of horrifying in just the sense of like watching it happen in the imagery, but it's not like, none of it makes any sense. But like Elizabeth Debicki showing up in, you know, in a bulkhead, like with wires literally going through her body, or that's kind of neat. But yeah, this is where that thing where it's like, what does the movie really want from me? Like, what is it asking of me? And it wants me to take it semi-seriously. And if it wants me to take it semi-seriously, that space station makes no sense, because it's like, what, does it have artificial gravity? But if they can have artificial gravity, like, you'd think they'd know how to do some other things, because otherwise it makes no sense how they're walking around things, because you've got to be on the outside of the circular piece. Like, I'm not a scientist. I could be wrong. Maybe there's something here that I don't know. But it's just, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. It's almost like they should have gone whole hog and done like a oh shoot, what's the I'm completely blanking, the horror films that made the guy that went on to do Spider-Man famous, and I can't remember his name or the horror film's name.
Went on to do Spider-Man? Oh, Sam Raimi? Or
yes, what's his the Dead?
Is that, or no, is that George? No, yeah, Sam Raimi. Yeah.
What made him famous? This is really
Evil Dead and
Evil Dead. You know how the Evil Dead just kind of have that gleeful, crazy zaniness?
Yeah.
I mean, you could almost have done that here with just crazy stuff happening, but you almost can't have that in the earth dying below. Like, tonally, it doesn't quite work. Yeah. And you also have that guy explain on the news what might happen when they do it, and then what he explained happens. Like, remove him. Take him out of there. Let people be confused about what's going on. It's like, if you're gonna have a movie where dimensions intersect and crazy stuff happens, then don't spoon feed it. Like, that's not the kind of plot you spoon feed to people. Alien versus Predator, the title tells you what the movie is. That's where you spoon feed. Like, so, like, I don't know who their audience is if they think that they have to explain that the weird stuff happening is from dimensions intersecting. Like, you're either here with us or you're not anyway. Make it mysterious and creepy and weird and not have any internal logic if that's what you're gonna do.
Well, and it's like, there's this whole, like, we keep cutting back to this, you know, our lead's husband on Earth, and that was all added like after the fact. I think it was all reshoots after they did test screenings, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it goes there. It doesn't mean anything. It's just attached to the movie.
Well, and if you've seen Silent Hill, the movie, which has my all-time favorite. I think there was a fire here as they stand in a room that is charcoal. That has the exact same thing where there's all
Maybe
these.
mixing the game up with the movie, but
No, that's the movie.
oh, okay. I think that's in the game too, or one of the games.
Something different happens in one of the games. Anyway, in the
Okay.
movie, there's all these, like, the wife goes into Silent Hill, and then you follow Sean Bean as he like is anxious about his wife, and it never connects to anything. And then later I find out, well, those are shoots they did later because like there was too many girls in it or something like that. So watching this, I was like, this feels exactly like the Silent Hill movie, and so it made sense.
Yeah.
Gotta put the husbands in there somewhere.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I'm trying to like even come up like ultimately the one thing that I appreciate above some of the other like the imagery is kind of poor. I like some of the stuff that's going on. Chris O'Dowd is funny. I like some of the actors in it, but like it's weirdly contained. Like usually in these dimension hopping TV episodes or movies, it's like not you don't just hop one dimension. You're hopping like
Right.
10 dimensions, or you're like going forward in dimensions and then you have to go back to get back to your dimension or whatever. So like the fact that this is 2 dimensions and they just have to like figure things out, and that sort of like we just have to hop back because of how there's one throwaway line where it's like all we know about quantum entanglements says that
Right.
you just have to fire it again to go back, and it's like that doesn't what okay sure what do I know.
Yes.
But like I like that it's weirdly contained to 2 dimensions. But other than that, yeah, it's like in the cast, we've got our 2 main leads are a mixed race black woman and David Oyelowo, who I don't know but is black, maybe mixed race, I don't know. But and then we've got Zhang Ziyi, I think is her name, who's really famous for being in Hero, and I think she's the one in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And so like it's the cast is diverse again, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, ultimately I kind of shrug at this movie. Like Chris O'Dowd is funny.
It's nice to see a diverse cast in a mediocre sci-fi film instead of just white guys, but it's still just
it's just
again without Chris O'Dowd and his arm and some of the. I mean, I enjoyed the weird stuff that happened, but it's not really worth watching an hour and 40-minute film just for. I mean,
no.
Honestly, for me it is, but for most people, it isn't worth watching an hour and 40-minute film just for that.
It's that thing where the making of the film is a more interesting thing to ponder than the film itself. Like, oh, so J.J. Abrams like came in, during, I think they were when, helped rewrite the script or something, and then they filmed it, and then they turned it into a Cloverfield movie, and like how that all leads to this kind of messy, kind of like silly, mediocre movie is kind of interesting. But that they then blitz on Super Bowl Sunday and like here's a trailer and go watch it, like that's kind of more interesting than most of what happens in the movie.
And for the record, I actually think I don't really, as I said, I'm not big on either of the previous Cloverfield films, but I think 10 Cloverfield Lane stands up to the original Cloverfield. I think they're pretty even in quality. They're just very different movies. It's hard to compare them. But this is just kind of it. It's not it has hints of creativity, but it's not creative enough to really be that interesting.
Yeah, I need
in either a good or a bad way.
I need to watch those movies, but this one I don't think I'm going to be revisiting.
You really should, because I mean, at least the first one, I mean, it's you've been watching all these Godzilla movies. It's a monster movie.
It is, and it was important
and
at the time.
I've even seen the guy, I think Matt Reeves, is that
the director? He went on to do other things. Matt Reeves
was it not him? Okay, I thought it was him that did this other monster movie I've seen, but I guess not. So,
well, he did a couple of the newer Planet of the Apes movies, which I enjoy. I've heard people call him like a smaller version of not a smaller version, but like the second tier version of what's his name, Tenet director whose name is
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, but I don't know why.
Why are we having name problems tonight?
I don't know, but anyways, that's interesting. I need to go watch that. Now we're talking about another movie, so let's be done with this part of this conversation.
Okay, so you know what? Whatever, watch it or don't. It's
Yeah.
fine. Oh, I did want to say that I thought the subtitles for this movie were kind of special because never have I had the subtitles describe what's happening. Like usually subtitles are for sounds and music and dialogue, but it was like electricity intensifies, and I'm like, is that a sound? I don't think that's a sound.
It's kind of like we got the subtitles that might be for somebody who's
Yeah,
completely like would it be for somebody who's completely deaf? But why would you have that extra stuff there? Do you need it if you're completely deaf?
yeah, it's
Or it almost sounds like the stuff that we like if you're blind, and you're trying to watch a movie, it sounds like whatever would they'd be, because movies are accompanied by an extra track for people who can't, at least as far as I understand it. So like it almost sounds like that. So it was weird to
yeah.
get some of the subtitles for that movie.
Yeah, and actually I had two more notes I just really quickly want to going to your science jargon stuff. I mean, a lot of the conflict in the film was about the space station
Yeah,
being broken.
yeah,
And while I enjoy me some Geordie LaForge techno babble, that can't be the entirety of the episode.
yeah,
And so there was so much of what they needed to overcome in the movie was technobabble, like the quantum entanglement stuff, that it's really hard to get engaged and like
yeah,
so if we fix the who's or what's it's, then it just doesn't
yeah,
it's hard to even follow what the stakes are, and then and the situation is so dire to begin with that you're like, how is this worse, because you were already had no chance and now you have no chance again. Like that also it in a way made the plot less measurable than Alien versus Predator, where there's so many aliens and so many predators, and you're gonna write this is like, well, now they've got to fix the valve. Like, I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, that was the last thing I had to say about that. Now we've beaten Cloverfield Paradox until it's lost its arm, which is scrawling a help note. I don't know.